after a long while of not so consistent videos. Finally, as hopefully at least one of 17 of you who have subscribed, which thank you very much. Hopefully if one of you have been waiting, we're going to talk macro. Now, the reason, in short, the reason I don't really like macro is because, at least with regards to the Canon 100, 100 2.8L macro, I think it's just that. The reason I didn't like it too much, I bought it for like 600 something used, and I actually sold it for pretty much 600 something used, so I wasn't too upset about that. The reason I didn't really like the actual lens that much was because it didn't do as much as I thought it would. It's a great piece of glass. Let's get that out of the way first. It's wonderful, and there's a bounty of evidence of how good it can be. But when I was using it, I didn't ever go and think to myself that it filled a niche that I didn't have with my other lenses. So that already put it at a bit of a disadvantage. Another thing is that the amount of macro photography that goes on that is really, really good is incredible. There are some insane pictures out there of all sorts of wonderful things. But a lot of those are, focus stacking. A lot of them have so many different elements like flashes, editing, just, along with focus stacking. There's just so many different things that go into each of those pictures, and it isn't totally fair to get the macro lens and then act, or at least think, that you will get those pictures right off the bat. You can still get some kick-ass awesome images. There are a few images that I took with it that are really, really cool, and I just wanted to at least try and show those off a little bit. First one I wanted to show off was actually a picture I took that is not really macro related, at least in the general context. It's a portrait, and I think it's a decent one at that, a good one even, and I took it with that lens, and I really, really like how it came out. It's incredibly sharp. It's very, very, very sharp, about as sharp as my 70-200 could be, although I do think that my 70-200 IS2 would land this focus far more often and land it much more consistently, much more predictably. The 100 has an IS in it, but it's not exactly the newest IS, nor is it a quiet one. So if you're using it for something where you want to be quiet, then just be warned. I mean, chances are you'll edit the sound out anyways, but just be prepared for that. But I really like this picture, and I even put it on my business card because it worked. It just worked where I put it there. It's very sharp, as I said. The colors came through very well. This is somewhat edited. Another one that I wanted to show off that gives you a little bit more of the macro oomph is this picture of my dog. Is again with the macro lens, obviously. Very, very sharp. Very, 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 very sharp. And I was very close to him, which was it's a really neat experience, if you do end up renting this lens, to get this close to something and be able to still focus on your subject. And that's really fun because it's, you always have those moments when you're with like a 24-70, for example, and you're like trying to situate yourself and like, oh, I gotta get in this awkward position. With the macro lens, you're just in focus like, all the time, and that's really cool. It's a really neat experience to use that. But this picture of my dog, I was like laying down on the floor with him, right? So, it was very helpful. Very, very, very sharp. The colors weren't the best, but that was just because the light was kind of odd. So I just threw it black and white, and it looks phenomenal. I really, really like it. I brought it with me to this winery, and we were eating some bread, because that's what you do there. The problem that you'll run into, and another reason that the macro photography as a whole isn't for me, and another reason that it might not be for you unless you want to invest a lot more than just the lens, is that you'll run into situations where 2.8, which you would think is generally going to be what you're using, and for a lot it will be. You get a lot more light, which becomes an issue when you get that close to things. You lose light because you literally block the light. So using 2.8 is something that you'll want to do. But you'll want to focus stack if you're using 2.8, because then you'll run into situations like this where you get a very, very, very small thing in focus, and that's cool in one regard because it's one thing and it really isolates what you're trying to go for. But if what you're going for is too thick, like literally the object is too thick, then you'll kind of create this weird mixture of out of focus and focus where you don't want it to be. Focus stacking would help with that. Another thing you could do is bump up your aperture to, 8 even would be a good one. But then you lose so much light. You're probably already pushing it with 2.8, maybe, keeping your ISO low. So you're going to have to work around that. And sometimes it can work, like the picture with my dog or the portrait. But this I saw this and I was like, oh, you know what? That's going to be very persistent. And it was. You encounter it in every single kind of close-up picture that you're trying to take. And you can see it particularly with the grape. Sometimes it does work, but not every time. And, if you have a flash, it would help a lot because you're able to just crank the amount of light, the ambient light, by using the flash. But that's not always going to happen, and that's not always applicable, nor do you necessarily have the money to buy a decent flash. The colors come out really, really well in this lens, and there's no issue really there. Again, it can be very sharp, but it can also not be sharp, and it's not a 70 to 200 macro. Like, that's not what it is, obviously. But I mean, like, in terms of the focusing and in terms of the IS, it's just not the same, and it isn't really advertised to be the same. But keep that in mind, that it's a different kind of lens. Ultimately, for me, it came down to whether or not I felt like I needed it. I didn't think, I would use this on a wedding. I didn't think that. Even for a ring shot, I could use my 24 to 70. I could use the 70 to 200 at 200. There's so many different options that I can use for this thing. Moreover, I don't necessarily think that getting the more expensive L version is worth it. I haven't used the non-L version, but it didn't feel quite like an L glass like I'm familiar with. So ultimately, I do think you should rent the lens and even maybe consider a 35 macro. I'm pretty sure they have one of those. They have the other 100mm macro. I'd definitely look at that and buy used, because the used one I had was brand new, essentially. It was essentially brand new and worked great, and then I sold it for the same that I bought it for. So as long as you just keep care of things and keep everything, you'll probably be okay. Or buy new. You do what you want with your money. Those are my overarching opinions on the lens, and I guess macro as a whole, because you really do kind of need to jumble a lot of those different aspects of it. But that's where I'm at. I don't have the lens anymore. I sold it. It's gone. It's loud too, but I already touched on that. So if you enjoyed this, go ahead and show me some support. Otherwise, I will hopefully see you around. Goodbye.